August 31st. At this very moment, Putin's palace near Gelendzhik is on fire. It's blazing. Sources report a drone crash and sabotage. The armed forces of Ukraine have struck oil refineries, railways, and ammunition depots. Russia is losing oil, fuel, and even symbols of power. A Fipsky oil refinery. The Afipsky and Kuibyshev oil refineries are ablaze and a fire is raging near Putin's palace. Russian media report dozens of hectares on fire, hundreds of firefighters and helicopters. Putin, meanwhile, has fled to the SCO summit in China. Is this a coincidence or sabotage? Let's discuss the new special operations by the SBU and GUR on Russian territory with Oleksandr Demchenko. Right now. Of course, they called for backup. He hit again. Can you truly believe it? Just absolutely incredible.
Hello, Dasha. Hello, everyone. Well, as I predicted earlier, as soon as Putin ends up in China, fireworks go off in Russia. That's basically what happened, because what we're seeing in Gelendzhik is a strike at the most sensitive spot, a blow to his jewel, to his place, almost said his burial place, to his mega bunker in the rock, which he's probably been building for years. So what's the key point? The key point is that Putin deliberately destroyed his Bosharov Rushi residence in advance because he was afraid it would be targeted. In the end, it was Gelendzhik that got hit, his palace, which had been built for so long, or rather, which Rotenberg, Timchenko, and all the others had been building for so long. What's important is that, in reality, over the past few weeks, Putin has been receiving very important signals. Very important signals are being sent to him, to Vladimir Putin. The message is this: we can reach anywhere, the range has changed, and Ukraine is no longer going to just give up, let things slide, and leave everything unanswered. For Kyiv, for Dnipro, for Zaporizhia, for Kharkiv, and for Sumy, for Kherson, and for the countless Ukrainian cities that have been relentlessly bombed by the bloody Russian occupation forces, both recently and over the past years. There will be a response. And it's not for nothing that Ukraine is showcasing both the Flamingo, the long-range Neptune, and a huge number of other missiles, shells, and the latest modernized drones that are capable of covering long distances and striking at various key targets and directions. As you know, Dasha, people recently came to Putin and caused a public scandal for him in the Kremlin. These were firstly representatives of the oligarchs, and secondly, the security officials. To be honest, they've long since merged and now represent the same party line, so to speak. The so-called collective Sekin and the so-called collective Potanin came to Putin, caused a scandal, and told him, either you give us money and restore our factories, or we stop funding your war. This is a very important signal, which we literally just heard at the Oligarchs Forum, and it was publicly announced and voiced. And this is an important signal. Why? Because it shows that Putin really doesn't have money for the war, that Putin is truly facing a crisis in Russia, and that things are far from calm for Putin in the political segment in terms of the political or socio-political situation inside the Russian Federation. And broadly speaking, he is facing major problems in general, and the crisis in Russia is growing in every area. Economic crisis, social crisis, and so on. And the fact that these strikes happened during Putin's trip to the territory of the People's Republic of China signals only one thing: that Vladimir Putin is going to China because he is afraid he will lose the war for Ukraine, because he is afraid that in general he won't be able to handle his own military machine because he has no money, because he has no resources, because without the help of the Chinese, he won't manage. That's why everyone is gathering in China now: Putin, Lukashenko, Kim Jong-un. And they will be asking the Chinese Emperor Xi Jinping for permission to further escalate, intensify, and continue large-scale military actions against Ukraine. Yes or no? That's what China will tell them. And in the next 3 days, we will understand which direction the war will take. This is another stage in the latest stage in this war when it will become clear and obvious what China will do, what is at stake. Either it will allow Putin to keep going, or it will say, no, put an end to this bloody mess. Or it will tell Lukashenko, go ahead, join the war, and I don't care about you, your regime, your entire entourage, or your money. Or not. Lukashenko is untouchable. He must not be touched. Vladimir, leave him alone. He will send Kim Jong-un and his army or some of his so-called dogs, 12,000, 15,000 to fight against Ukraine. Or not. Will he give the North Koreans permission to continue supplying Russia with artillery shells in huge quantities or not? All these questions will be decided in Beijing in the coming days. And because of this, by and large, it will also depend on how this war will unfold further, what its nature will be, and what the White House will do. Although it seems to me that Trump is in such a miserable, poor condition, as you know, even American doctors are now saying he has about 7 months left to go, which I don't believe. But nevertheless, I'm not really sure that Donald Trump will react to anything or that there will be any tough response toward Beijing or Moscow. Because as soon as the question comes up, let's give Putin another 14 days, Putin uses those 14 days to strike relentlessly. And we've seen this in Kiev and in the casualties among Kiev residents. And we've seen it in Dnipro, in Zaporizhia, and in a number of other major Ukrainian cities and directions.
Sasha, regarding the strikes on Russia, look, everyone is discussing how as soon as Putin flew to Beijing, Ukraine's security service and the armed forces of Ukraine began actively striking Russian territory. First of all, it was a hellish night for Russia. The armed forces of Ukraine struck the Fipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai, the Kuibyshev oil refinery in Samara, in Syzran, all in Krasnodar with clouds of black smoke over the city. And it turns out that the command of Ukraine's drones and troops made a statement that in August alone, Russia lost 21% of its oil refining capacity. This is the lifeblood of the Russian army. Question, in your opinion, how much does this hurt the Russian front and can it withstand it if the strikes on the refineries continue?
This hits hard because it's a matter of supplies, it's a matter of fuel, it's a matter of deliveries and logistics directly. Moreover, I have repeatedly emphasized in our conversations that Russia is Moscow-centric. And as soon as you strike a refinery or an airport or block something or block a railway or the railway tracks, it directly affects Moscow and Muscovites. It has an immediate impact. Moreover, oil refineries are like the very needle in Koshchei's egg. That is where Vladimir Putin's death lies. That is where, in fact, his power is truly hidden. Because Putin's power and the war rest on only one thing, on one factor. That is the oil and gas revenues in the Russian budget. Before the large-scale strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on oil refineries, which we've been witnessing over the past few weeks or even a month, we could observe that Russia had already lost 30% of its annual budget revenue. Now consider what has happened over the last month to 3 weeks, when Ukraine simply destroyed several of the most important large-scale city-forming plants, those very oil refineries. Look at what is happening along the Moscow-Rostov-Krasnodar highway, where there are huge numbers of trucks. These lines, this convoy, is not getting any shorter. It keeps growing day by day. A huge number of trucks, a huge number of cars, with everyone searching for at least 10 liters per person. Look at what's happening. What are they going to do about all this? And on every liter of gasoline, 60% is excise tax, which goes to the state as revenue. Putin doesn't have that. That's why Budanov and Malik are right when they say that soon Putin won't have enough money for the war, and then he'll have to start charging his own citizens. The question is, are Russians ready to be charged like that? I'm sure that those who took a trillion rubles in the last 2 weeks, or rather the last week and a half, are not ready for Putin to start charging them. The question is, what are Russians or the Russian elite actually willing to accept? You know, for example, that just recently General Gerasimov stated that the war is ongoing. A Telegram channel run by an intelligence officer affiliated with the Russian security services, as far as I understand, stated that Gerasimov is basically afraid of ending the war because he fears that they'll come for him, take him by the arm, arrest him, and either shoot him, execute him, dispose of him, or who knows what they'll do to him, basically. This is a very telling story. He is afraid. He understands perfectly well that Putin will sick everyone on him, that he'll be made the scapegoat. Him, his generals, his inner circle. One of his deputies is already in prison. He was given a huge number of years in prison. Gerasimov's deputy is in prison. He's already been removed. That's why we're saying that the generals are afraid. Gerasimov is afraid. He understands perfectly well. But the question is different. Will they try to organize an uprising, a coup, a rebellion? Will they send tanks to Moscow, the army to Moscow? Will they create a new Prigozhin? Will they release Gherkin from prison and send him off to stage a coup with a gang of thugs, ex-cons and so on, the ones fighting for him on the front lines? Will they send this whole gang to conquer Moscow? Yevgeny Prigozhin, Operation 2.0. Will all of this happen again? I'm not sure, but anything is possible in the Russian Federation. In fact, throughout Russian history, anything has always been possible. Just recently, American channels and journalists were absolutely stunned by how Prigozhin marched through Rostov towards Moscow, almost made it, and then suddenly stopped. It's only been about 2 years. What will happen now is unknown, but the scenario could very well repeat itself. Even though I only give it a small chance, I still consider it possible. Because either Putin will devour the generals or the generals will devour Putin. And the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces are striking strategic enterprises, hitting logistics, targeting the most important defense factories and complexes, attacking Russian aviation, and striking the Russian fleet. All of this is to disrupt the enemy's plans for an offensive, for offensive actions. And we know that Putin's summer offensive, which carried over into autumn, has stalled and failed. It will be interesting to see who will be blamed, besides General Gerasimov, who is very eager to continue this bloody mess.
Sasha, are we correct in understanding that for Putin, stopping the war would be tantamount to death? Moreover, even Trump made a statement that Putin will not meet with Zelensky. Gerasimov made a statement that the so-called special military operation, the war, is continuing accordingly. And here's the question. Are we right in thinking that at this point, nothing and no one can stop Putin because the US is simply incapable of doing so?
This is a very, broad topic because, look, what does it mean no one can stop him? Putin, first of all, has already been stopped. He hasn't been able to conquer all of Ukraine. Right now, he's bargaining with Trump and basically selling thin air. He says, I won't conquer all of Ukraine, seize Kyiv, or change the government. And you please give me the remaining thousands of square kilometers of Ukrainian Donbas territory and freeze the war. That's the kind of request, that's Putin's ultimatum-like approach. But this ultimatum keeps shrinking, getting smaller and smaller. He had completely different plans before, Napoleonic plans. So what happened? So to say that Putin can't be stopped, he's already been stopped. He's being stopped by the Ukrainian army. He's being stopped by Ukrainian special services. He's being stopped by his own economy. He's being stopped by Western sanctions. He's also being partially stopped by the arms race with Europe and the United States, which has begun, and we can't ignore that. Trump, unfortunately, is not stopping him right now. We don't know how things will play out in October. A lot will be decided in October because on October 7th, Trump could give Putin a crazy birthday present. And Putin, in turn, for Trump on the 10th, when the Nobel Prize award ceremonies begin, including the Nobel Peace Prize, which Trump definitely won't receive because of Vladimir Putin. There's only one question. What will Trump do when he doesn't get this prize because of Vladimir Putin and most likely because of China? What will he do? He'll say something like, it's all pointless. I don't want the Nobel Peace Prize anymore. Now I'm going to go after everyone together with Putin. Or he'll say, I'll try again next year and get it then. We don't know. But obviously, the Americans will keep helping anyway. Yes, that's the current administration. This administration will change. Congress will change. Maybe, maybe not. From the point of view of the Republican majority. We don't know how the elections will turn out, but those elections are coming up very soon. When there are elections, it's obvious that the American voter will want some help making up their mind. And the American voter, whether Democrat or even Republican, for the most part supports Ukraine, supports the armed forces of Ukraine, and stands against Russia, against Putin, and against his regime and his army. This means that, in principle, even Trump will have to play along and support Ukraine for at least some period of time. At least for half a year during the elections, before the elections, and so on. This essentially means that other forces will also get involved and will somehow pay more attention to Ukraine. Therefore, to say that Ukraine will fall out of focus is a mistaken judgment. Those who say this are people who do not understand or are not familiar with American domestic politics.
An important question, what will happen now at the SCO summit and at all the negotiation platforms? As we understand it, Putin has arrived in China for a 4-day visit, with plans to discuss security, the economy, and sanctions. He will take part, as I understand, in the parade along with Lukashenko, Kim Jong-un, Xi, and everyone has written that Putin will be either to the right or to the left of Xi.
This is an important summit. I literally just mentioned this a moment ago. Look, it seems to me that some very important decisions will be made regarding the war, regarding discussions about what to do next with Trump, with the Americans, what the party line is, the common party line, so to speak. It's important that, as far as I understand, Zelensky has sent a secret signal to the Chinese, to Xi Jinping, and that there are some significant matters that will most likely be discussed there as well. I'm sure that the American administration, through Trump and his representatives, has also sent some important signals to Xi and so on. There's Modi, the Indian, who will be coming there, the Prime Minister of India, who is probably very troubled by Trump's tariffs and who disagrees with the fact that he's only getting $18 billion in discounted oil from Russia, while he's already losing $50 billion or however much it is. This is not beneficial for him. Maybe we'll see a gradual split within the whole SEO system, within the entire BRICS system. Maybe we'll see India turning toward the West, moving away from Putin, away from China. Or maybe we won't see this at all. And instead, we'll witness a completely different process. We will understand and realize a lot of things after some time, a few weeks after this summit ends, because it will quickly become clear what this axis, referred to as the axis of evil 2.0, is preparing for. I think China will not abandon its plans to destabilize and essentially to stir up the global situation. I am certain that China will create every possible circumstance to ensure that the Americans get bogged down in Europe, get stuck in the Middle East, so that Russia can escalate the war against Ukraine and against Europe as a whole, to use the Lukashenko factor, to use the presence of Russian troops in Belarus, and to constantly threaten NATO's eastern flank. I am certain that the Chinese will support Iran and its ambitions to destroy the Israelis, and in general to destabilize the Middle East as a whole in order to shift American forces and resources into these regions, both Europe and the Middle East, so that they can later have the opportunity to seize Taiwan. A lot is about to be decided right now. By the way, let me say right away, I honestly believe that a war between China and Taiwan is not far off. Next year, the beginning of 27, that's not far away at all. This process that has been set in motion, it seems to me, is inevitable. It's already been decided there in China, in Beijing, by Xi and his inner circle. But anything is possible. You see, politics is still at its very core the enduring story of what is truly possible. That is precisely why it seems to me that a great deal, indeed a significant amount, is going to be decided right now, in this very moment. But that doesn't mean that just because they decide something, something will change globally. They've made decisions many times before. There were Olympic agreements before the start of the full-scale invasion during the Olympic Games in Beijing between Xi and Putin. Putin promised a blitzkrieg. It failed. Nothing worked out. There were other agreements. There were agreements through Beijing with North Korea. Did anything come out of that? Nothing worthwhile came out of it. There were other agreements. My God, China is helping Putin build, as far as we understand now, these new modernized Geron drones. Literally today, they found Chinese parts and a Chinese camera, a webcam in there. Moreover, we know that China is helping Putin build an entire drone manufacturing facility in the Khabarovsk region, a plant for producing a huge number of drones. In other words, China is involved in the war. China is sending machines, sending chips to Putin, various components, and is helping Putin build missiles. I think that over time, he will help Putin rebuild his strategic aviation, not right now, but eventually. Still, Dasha, he is helping. And the question is, what will restrain not Putin, but China? What should be the terms of negotiations? And what should Trump and Xi agree on in order to finally put an end to this bloody mess and prevent the world from plunging into a third world war? These are the key questions. But I am sure that in November, at the end of October or the beginning of November, when Trump and Xi meet, we will also find out what the world will face in the following 6 months.
Axios wrote that Trump is ready to step away from the war because he once again made a statement during his latest interview at the White House. Quote, "The kids are playing war games in the sandbox, let them fight a little longer." In other words, Trump is saying that he will most likely withdraw from the negotiation process simply because he cannot put pressure on Putin, he cannot put pressure on Russia, he is not capable of that. And that's why he says, let the war continue. And with this kind of terrible language, comparing war to a sandbox, these horrifying comparisons, what do you think about that?
I don't pay attention to Trump or his rhetoric. Trump keeps making mistake after mistake. Just notice, today he attacked the CIA. He declassified one of the Central Intelligence Agency employees who was working on Russia. As I understand it, he wasn't supposed to be declassified, that he was secretly working somewhere there against Russia, against Putin, against the Putin regime. This is essentially a continuation of the war between Trump and the CIA. It's unclear what this war... And listen, honestly, I don't care what Donald Trump says right now. Whatever he says, it still helps Vladimir Putin, right? Because we don't see any concrete actions. We don't see approval for ATACMS. We don't see approval for Storm Shadow. Yes, they're sending some new missiles, but their range is minimal. It's a short range. To say that they'll allow strikes deep into Russia to destroy Moscow, St. Petersburg, or to hit targets as far as the Urals, no, absolutely not. And it's also not true that these missiles will arrive immediately. It will take years. All of this has already been stated by military experts whose reports and viewpoints are available for review. So, he says something, Putin acts, Putin strikes. Trump is not blind, and neither is his administration. To say that they're idiots who don't understand anything, no, they understand everything perfectly well. Obviously, or rather, let's say probably Trump doesn't have a plan B. What else is there to do? After Anchorage, where he screwed up and failed with his plan to resolve the situation, everything started going wrong. I'm sure that even the recent meetings with Ukrainian representatives, yes, on US territory, the meeting between Yermak and Umarov with Witkoff, also demonstrated, first of all, that Witkoff didn't understand everything correctly, and secondly, that Witkoff once again fell for some absolutely bizarre persuasions from Putin, which turned out to be untrue and mistranslated. Because Witkoff, as always, showed up to Putin without a translator and without a State Department representative. I have only one question. Does Witkoff know Russian well? Does he know it well? Can he talk to Putin one-on-one? Who translated, roughly speaking? Kirill Dmitriev, Lavrov? Don't think. What's going on there behind closed doors? But I think that the Ukrainian delegation made it clear and outlined the red lines once again. Moreover, it seems to me that this time Europe, this European G7 together with Zelensky, showed Trump that no, Europe's security issues will be decided with Europe at the table, not without Europe at that same table. By the way, I don't believe in this story about a three-way meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. Putin met with Trump once. He doesn't need to do it again. He won't meet with Trump in a three-way, a two-way, or anything like that. He met with Trump once. Well, once it was in Finland and once it was at the G20 summit. But that was just a brief meeting. It wasn't any kind of official reception or anything like that. That was enough for him back then. He won't meet with Trump anymore. He has nothing to talk about with Trump. What matters to him is to outmaneuver Trump. and for this manipulation to go on for many years. That's what's important to him, to drag out the process and keep fighting. As for what's going on in Trump's head, he doesn't care at all.
So what Trump made a statement about, that there will be a trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the US, and Russia, and you even mentioned possible locations: Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Switzerland. Do you consider this scenario unrealistic?
I believe none of this will happen. Look, those same countries have already been involved, even in a broader format, right? We were offered, they put on the table a different list of countries, a more expanded format. This was before the meeting, the supposed meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Trump promised, he called Putin and said, yes, the meeting will happen. Putin gave his approval. That's it. We immediately start organizing. But then when he realized that nothing was working out and Russia refused everything and said that they would still continue with the Istanbul format and not, yes, they said, we are raising the level of the delegation. Then they just decided to forget about it and didn't raise anything there. The same Medinsky, so to speak, who is not needed by anyone here. So this has already happened. We've already seen it and you've already heard it. Trump is now saying that he will end the war. Well, not the war, but the situation around Gaza in the next 3 weeks. There are only about 2 weeks left now. Do you believe he will end it? Is that even looking likely over there? No. He just realized that he can't keep bringing up Ukraine, the issue of Ukraine and this war in the media space anymore because it's already become ridiculous. So he temporarily switched his focus to Gaza, but in both cases it's absolutely impossible to actually do anything. Because in order to do something, you have to punish the regimes very harshly, the Iranian regime and the Putin regime. And I'm not sure that Trump is ready for that. By the way, we saw this with Iran as well, with those bombings, when they quickly carried out the strikes and didn't want to go all the way, destroying, annihilating, and changing the regime. And we see it now with the situation with Putin, when it's another 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks, and the bombing just keeps going.
Friends, the most important thing, write in the comments what you think about the upcoming SCO summit in Beijing on September 3rd, when the 80th anniversary victory parade of World War II will take place in the Pacific region. Because everyone is wondering whether Trump will be there. But as I understand it, Trump is most likely not going to fly in for the parade. And what do you think?
No, Trump won't be at the parade. That would be humiliating, really. Trump at the parade among them, even though he wanted to meet to go see Kim Jong-un again, surely he'd like to meet with Putin again, probably would want to tell Lukashenko that he is once again deeply respected, as if being respected wasn't enough. As if in general, Lukashenko isn't enough either, right? But I mean the way of addressing him. But you see, Dasha, Trump won't be at the parade. For Trump, a parade like that in itself is already a loss. It's already a defeat. Not because Putin is there or Lukashenko or even Kim Jong-un himself, but because over these years of leadership from 2016, 2017, when Trump first came to power, and then 10 years later during Biden's term, and now with Trump's second term, what China is gathering around itself, all of this, the fact that Indians are coming there and other representatives as well, and that America can no longer influence everyone, and American sanctions and tariffs are often treated with indifference. But within the framework of individual alliances around China, it symbolizes only one thing, that this policy pursued by Trump, previously by Biden and all the others, is a policy that does not contribute to resolving either situations or wars, but on the contrary, only fuels the power of countries like China. Unfortunately,
friends, please like this video. Write a few kind words in the comments to support Ukraine's armed forces, our partnership. Once again, tell us in the comments what you expect from the SCO summit and from September, specifically September 3rd. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Toponymist Oleksandr Demchenko. Sasha, thank you so much, and see you in October.
see you next time. Bye.